Hey everyone, Jenn Shurkus here, and I'm so excited to be on the Scrapbooking Cards Today channel with you, sharing some tips and tricks on how to get your sentiments and your words nice and straight on your cards and your projects. So, I am going to be using some fun Lawn Fawn goodies from the new Spring 2023 release, but hopefully, you'll find inspiration with these ideas and you can use anything that you have in your stash. So, the first thing I wanted to talk about is how when you have long sentiments, especially with clear stamps, how to keep those nice and straight once you've taken them off of the package. If you're going to be using an acrylic block to stamp them, what you want to make sure that you do is don't fight the stamp. Just set the stamp down on your table. Um, don't wiggle it, don't wobble it, just let it fall in place. It's going to fall naturally into a straight line. And then you can go ahead and use your acrylic block, pick it up, and go ahead and stamp with it. The same thing is going to work when you're working with a stamping platform such as the Misty. Lay that stamp down on your piece of cardstock that you're going to stamp with and then press the Misty down onto that stamp. Now, that's not to say that you can't have a lot of fun with clear stamps. Remember, you can bend and move them to be in a fun arch or swish, however you want it on your project. But again, today we're just talking about how to keep things nice and straight. So, something fun to use on your project is alphabet stamps because you can create any sentiment you would like and you can personalize your sentiments. So, when working with alphabet stamps, especially with stamp sets from Lawn Fawn, this is the new Henry's Junior's ABCs. The clear stamps are cut in a way so that they have a nice block of polymer around that letter. So when you go to start to place them on your project, you can actually line up a whole word or even a whole sentence all at once. Just by touching the two stamps together, it's going to have the perfect placement for your, again, your sentiment or your sentence or whatever project you're working on. So what's great about this is not only will you be able to stamp things a little bit more quickly. So if you are making a stack of cards with the same sentiment, you would be able to stamp it all at once instead of individual letters. But it also spaces out the letters so that there's the correct kerning and spacing between those letters. And as a graphic designer and lover of typography, I am so appreciative of this. And Lawn Fawn also includes a lot of extra letters, so you can create many words. So you can see here, I'm using two S's, and I am able to start to type out skies the. So those are some tips with alphabet letters. The other thing that I find really helpful if I am wanting to cut my sentiments into strips of cardstock is before I even start stamping on those strips of cardstock, making sure that they are nice and straight. So here, as I bring them into my paper trimmer to trim them down a little bit, since I started with a nice and straight piece of cardstock, I'm able to still achieve the straight lines as I'm trimming this down a bit. So that's another little trick when you are wanting to keep things nice and straight easily. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was working with die cut letters. So these are Henry's ABC's die cuts from Lawn Fawn. And I love to mix and match some of the sentiment stamps that are in my stamp sets, but then also maybe accent a word really nice and large with some alphabet dies, some alphabet die cuts. So you can do this by using a ruler, as you can see, I'm quickly showing you here. But I really like to use the Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station by Ranger. I use this for a number of things. You can see mine is very well loved, but right now what I'm using it for is a grid. So you could do this with any grid mat that you may have. I am lining my letters up and spacing them out how I want it to appear on my project. And this part is a little bit finicky. You might want to adjust things, move things around, but once you get this part done, the rest is fairly easy. I'm going to use a piece of low tack tape. My favorite is the Spellbinder's Best Ever Craft Tape. This is what I use to hold my dies in place as I'm die cutting as well. And I just like to kind of put it on the back of my hand, take a little bit more of that adhesive off, and I'm going to place it down and pick up all my letters at once. And so now they're in place and ready to go. I am going to flip this over, and I want these letters to be popped up off my card. So I'm going to use some scrapbook adhesives foam strips. But if you were going to use a glue tube, you could use that right now as well. So I'm going to add the foam strips to the back of my letters. And then once I get the foam strips on the back of my letters, I'm going to go back and use that Make Art Station that has a grid. It's also a magnetic board. So the magnetic board is going to come into play in just a minute, where it's going to help me keep my project in place and my zero centering ruler. So I like to work from the bottom up to try to make sure I'm going to be able to fit everything on my card the way that I want. So I place the grass down and I place the cute little elephant down. And I know that I want my sentiment to end right at the nose of, or the trunk of the elephant. So I'm going to place this zero centering ruler just above the elephant. Because the elephant's popped up, I am going to use the magnets to hold this magnetic ruler in place. And then I'm going to take my letters and I'm going to peel off the liner off of those foam strips. And you want to do this gently so that your letters don't come off of the tape. If they did, you would just, bring back the grid and get things back in place again quickly. It's not the end of the world. I've done that more than once, but peeling them off gently will save that time for you to have to do that. And then using that zero centering ruler, I am going to make sure that I'm placing this part of my sentiment, this word, right in place where I want it. Now, if you were using a glue tube to do this, I recommend leaving that tape in place and let that glue tube settle, let it dry. But since these are foam squares or foam strips, I could go right ahead and peel that off. And I am going to be using that Best Ever Craft Tape. Again, I'm going to use it to hold down my images and my coordinating dies when I'm die cutting, so it's not wasteful at all. So I'm continuing to decorate my card. Again, still working from the bottom up. I knew I wanted a little cloud tucked behind that word. And so now we've got this word strip that we stamped with our alphabet stamps. I'm using that zero centering ruler to make sure that is nice and in line. And for the rest of the card, it's kind of go where there's room. I wanted the balloon to be off-centered just slightly since it's kind of floating in the sky and not necessarily perfect. And then I always love to mix some of my images popped up, some of my images flat with glue tube. And I think that adds a lot of really fun dimension to the card as well. So one more little sentiment at the top, and then we've got fly high, sky's the limit. I hope these tips and tricks have helped you get some ideas. maybe not feel so intimidated about trying to get things nice and straight on your project. Thank you so much for watching and have a fabulous day. Bye.